We will continue our seismic stratigraphy course, and today's topic is about seismic phases. And we need to know what does it mean, this word or this the definition of the seismic phases according to Brown and Fisher in 1979. It's just the definition is a sonic response to the lithology, and Brown and Fisher actually defined it as following. It is a seismic phase that represents an aerially definable three-dimensional unit composed of seismic reflections whose elements, the seismic reflections with elements such as configuration, amplitude, continuity, frequency, and interval velocity. Those elements must be differ from the elements of adjacent phases. So to tell that this is a specific phase, those elements has to be different from the adjacent component. And in seismic phases analysis, we just describe and interpret the seismic reflection parameters, as we said, the configuration, continuity, amplitude, and frequency, within a stratigraphic framework of the positional sequence. And the objective of this analysis is the determination of all variations of seismic parameters. We do that. Why? Because we need to determine the lateral lithophases and fluid type changes. So the purpose of seismic phases analysis is determination of lateral lithophases and fluid type changes. Those parameters we mentioned them before, reflection pattern geometries are perhaps the most useful for calibration or correlation with lithophases interpreted from well logs. So we will still need the well logs to make the good correlation between our seismic study and what is happening in reality, using well logs, cores, and cuttings. The positional environment, sediment source, and lithophases can be also interpreted by grouping all these parameters into a mappable three-dimensional seismic that finally we call it seismic phases. So if we have seismic phases unit, we need to compare it with this geology unit. So the seismic phases unit is interpreted to express certain lithology, stratigraphy, and the positional features of deposits, which will create the reflections we see in seismic section. And when we trace or we just follow up and track those individual reflections over any distance, we will see that they have some changes in characters, and this will reflect lithophases changes. If we have a bedding surface, single one, it may pass from, for example, sand to silt or mud in response to changing bottom environment or increasing water depth. This is in geology. So how about in the same way in seismic reflection also may pass from one lithophase to another. This will probably be indicated by a change in what here? Here the change will be happening, or we can see it in waveform and frequency and amplitude. This will tell us the change of the environment. And when it comes to the classification of seismic waves, there are different kinds of configuration provide the most obvious basis for the classification of seismic phases. In 1974, Sangri and Widmeyer, they suggested a classification with 6 different types, similar to the configuration we earlier studied: parallel, divergent, oblique, sigmoidal, chaotic, and reflection-free. You remember those? Here you can see them: reflection-free, layered, chaotic. Then from layered you have complex layered, simple layered, then you have oblique, you have parallel, divergent, all this stuff. So it's classification of seismic facies. This after Sangri and with Meyer in 1974. This is the first class. And you can see here each one of those parameters or those configuration will give you an indication about the environment. For example, parallel will give you indication of uniform condition on a stable, uniformly subsiding surface. If you move to divergent, you see this will give you an indication about deposition and progressive tilting. If you move to chaotic, you'll see high energy, or you'll give you an indication about high energy variability or disruption after deposition, and so on. Also in reflection free, you'll see clastic environment and non-clastic environment. Second one, or second classification, was done by Brown and Fisher in 1980, and they recognize only 4 types of seismic facies: parallel, divergent, which is one, prograding, mounded, trapped, and on lab fills. Also one more, even before that in 1977 by Sheriff, continuity and amplitude were suggested as a diagnostic attributes. So here the main thing in this classification is the continuity and high amplitude, which they are indicative of uniform depositional environment overall. And this is a table for the classification of Sheriff in 1977, and it will give you an idea about if you have high continuity and high amplitude in marine or non-marine environment. Same thing for low amplitude, and you see the sand prone and shale prone. Okay, in our next lecture, inshallah, we will learn about the seismic sequence. Enjoy your time and see you next. Bye.